Mozart was just such an amazing musician.
It's too bad he died Baroque. And welcome to another episode of CMI Composer Cup, Forbidden and Forgotten. We have finally reached the Encore 8, almost the creme of the creme of this bracket, and let's get right into it. So we have number 1 overall seed Zemlinsky going against the number 2 seed Messiaen. And in this one, the overall number 1 seed finally falls to a very worthy opponent in Messiaen, 6-3.
Right. So let's break this down because Messiaen just makes a huge mess of this whole thing, right? What does he do? So Zemlinsky, of course, sets up classic defensive techniques here. Again, he uses that wonderful romantic lyricism and what have you. And Messiaen, I always I think Boulez describes his music the best when he says he doesn't compose, he juxtaposes, right? And that's exactly what Messiaen did here. He sort of created a quadrant of different ideas. We have the gamelan music that he throws at them. We have his, I'll admit, not entirely perfect electronic music in there. He has his Catholic mysticism thrown in there. He then throws in these sort of juxtaposed, this sort of angular rhythmic patterns that really throw off and really scramble Zemlinsky. Zemlinsky held on the best he could, but when you've got all of these different musical styles going at you, he just could not hold it to the end.
Yeah, and that's what it takes sometimes to overcome a number 1 seed is have them just not perform in the way that they needed to. And Messiaen will be our first entry into the Forte 4. And the next one going down into the Waltz bracket, again, another number 1 seed still hanging on, Felix Mendelssohn going against the number 3 seed, Coleridge-Taylor. And Coleridge-Taylor finally scored on Mendelssohn, but Mendelssohn still prevails 10-1 in this one and is moving on into the Forte 4.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I want someone to upset Mendelssohn, it looks like that's not going to happen. At least not until the next round. Coleridge-Taylor went a good ways this tournament. I was actually surprised.
Definitely.
He died at 37 years of age and very young. Mm-hmm. And it would be wonderful to hear what would have happened if he had those extra years. We are performing one of his works this season as well, so audience members can get a glimpse of what his sound is.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what ended up happening here was Coleridge-Taylor, again, throws out the spiritual, and what does Mendelssohn do? He says, fine, you want to play that game? He uses the Protestant hymns, Mighty Fortress is Our God. He throws that back at him. He then, his organ works, his chorale tunes, his wonderful chorale singing and everything like that. I mean, Coleridge-Taylor just could not stand up against the might that is Mendelssohn. Right. Again, finally gets the point, right? Yep. I mean, he finally was able to sort of show a little bit of weakness there in Mendelssohn, but again, I just got to give it to my guy for standing there to the bitter end. Just holding his own.
And I think you're going to see a lot more Coleridge-Taylor throughout the country being performed, which is fantastic. I think a lot of orchestras are finally figuring out that there's some really great works, but unfortunately, today he falls to the great Mendelssohn. Moving into the ensemble bracket, our third region, still number 1 seed, Schoenberg going against the number 2 seed, Korngold. This one is probably the closest matchup that we had in the Encore 8. Schoenberg barely squeaking by 4-3. A little bit of a late game defensive effort for this one.
Yeah. So again, just to break this down, I think what Schoenberg finally got right there at the very end was he just sort of overwhelmed Korngold. I mean, you look at what he does here. He takes the sort of ostinato pattern. We started off in the bass, and then we just sort of build. That finally overwhelmed Korngold. That finally broke him down, finally got through his defenses. And I guess the problem Korngold is always going to have is, like Bernard Herrmann at the very beginning, film composer, that there's always going to be a little bit of baggage associated with that. So, but you know, I got to hand it to Schoenberg. He kept it together, though he was getting a little flustered there at the beginning. You could tell, really holds it, lets that atonality go, and we finish on a high note there.
So Schoenberg holding serve against Korngold, and again, I think Korngold out to the audience is going to disappoint a lot of people falling into this round, but it's kind of hard to deny Schoenberg moving into the Forte 4. And for the final slot into the Forte 4, we have the number 2 seed from the Serenade bracket, Martineau, versus the number 4 seed in Weill. And personally, I thought this one was going to be a little bit closer, but Martineau does prevail in this one 6-2. So pretty convincing. What do you think about that?
You know, I'm not very surprised at this, and I think this is actually a good result. I think Martineau is still underappreciated in relation to other composers that are out there right now.
I think he could win this.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a great chance he can win this. And Kurt Weill is he's such a wonderful composer for the theater, for even for concert hall. Obviously, Three Penny Opera. People know that. He's pretty much known by that. If anyone knows the Mac the Knife standard, well, that came from the Three Penny Opera. So it was a good run by Kurt Weill, and I think he has nothing to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm. So Martineau does prevail for the Serenade bracket, kind of ending the run of Weill that was the lowest seed to make it into the Encore 8 as a number 4 seed. Technically, Kurt Weill did prove to be our dark horse, but does end the run in the Encore 8. So that finally gets us to our championship level matchups. We have the final, I can't say that because of copyrights, but we'll have our Forte 4. We have number 1 Mendelssohn versus number 2 Messiaen. And we have number 1 Schoenberg going against number 2 Martineau. And I tell you what, this bracket has had some surprises, but we've kind of gotten to some expected top contenders, and I think we're in for a fantastic set of matchups.
Yep. It's going to be really fun to see what happens here.
What do you think about, the chances of Messiaen maybe versus Schoenberg even?
If that's going to be in the final
championship.
That's going to be really interesting. I mean, again, we see the way Mendelssohn has been playing. It's going to be hard for Messiaen to take him over. If we are looking at Messiaen and Schoenberg in the end, that's going to be a battle. I mean, for all we know, we could be having Messiaen versus Martineau. I mean, this thing has been going. It sort of seems to be going back and forth.
Well, this is the first time I'm rooting for Messiaen in this tournament, because if I have to hear Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, Symphony No. 4, or the Overture to Midsummer Night's Dream one more time, then he needs to. There's other works that Mendelssohn has composed.
Well, you know, the Hebrides Overture and the Wedding March.
Well, yeah, okay. So there's 5 works that he'd add. Yes.
I think there's a certain lady in here who actually wants to be hearing that Wedding March soon.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying.
So as we move on to the Forte 4, I'll be interested to see if one of our top number 1 seeds will fall.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're saying, Messiaen and Martineau, Personally, I see it as the number one seed prevailing, but I think that we couldn't have asked for a better Forte 4 for this season. So, so tune in next week as we will have the Forte 4 and the championship rounds as a double feature, one episode, and we'll have a little bit of post-mortem after that to kind of talk about how we went and maybe a little bit of more preview of our upcoming season, Forbidden and Forgotten, which will be starting right after the next episode. So for Paul Montalvo, Dr. Eric Schneeman, I'm Donald Mason, and that's been another Composer Cup Forbidden and Forgotten. Tune in next week as we find the champion. Thanks again, and good night.